Hello, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. This is your host, Cryptosomniac, here to bring you everything crypto related where the rich never sleep. Without further ado, I bring to you IOTA. IOTA is a cryptocurrency I've been talking about the past several days, and I finally took the toll and did a lot more research on it. I was invested in it prior, and I had a good idea of what it was, but last night I spent maybe 5-6 hours watching all the videos I could on IOTA, going over their website, watching what other people had to say about it, and I actually fell asleep reading the white paper. So I started to put together this presentation to you guys, and I just realized that I couldn't do it all in one session. I had to break this into at least two, and I'm sure we'll be talking about IOTA in the future. So this is going to be part one of a two-part series that I will complete on Friday. Now, why Friday? Tomorrow I'm going to be covering an ICO. So if you haven't noticed, I created a poll in the Facebook group. You can get access to that using the link below or in the banner of my profile on YouTube. But I said basically, if you can guess which ICO that I'll be covering tomorrow, you'll receive some free cryptocurrency. Now, I wrote here by accident, and because IOTA was on my mind, IOTA isn't actually an ICO anymore. In fact, we are, IOTA. Now, I did accidentally throw IOTA in here because IOTA was on my mind and I was making this video today. IOTA is not an ICO, so hint, it's not IOTA. So, again, just give this a vote, and I'm going to be selecting someone at random tomorrow. Additionally, if you haven't heard, the Moon Lounge is now accessible over on Patreon. Seats are filling up quick, and they are being sold in basically incremental packages. So the sooner you get in, the cheaper it is. You can find more information about that over there. What that is an opportunity for you to gain access to an exclusive group of just 100 students this month. And what I go over is my daily trades, my portfolio allocation, and basically the mindset I go into, prior to entering or exiting a position. So I'll be sharing all of that with just an exclusive amount of you guys. You can access to that here on this channel button here. You can also email me at cryptosomniac@gmail.com. The email is listed here. I'm sorry, this is actually my old email. You can email me at cryptosomniac@gmail.com to pay via cryptocurrency. So, without further ado, let's talk about IOTA. So I mentioned putting together this presentation, and it got to be a little lengthy. And here we are, August 11th. That is not the date today, but who cares? So, IOTA. Let's go back. IOTA stands for the Internet of Things, and the A is supposed to actually be a Greek symbol representing something really, really small, like an iota. Iota means really, really little, and we'll get more into why they chose the name IOTA, but IOTA basically stands for the Internet of Things, and I saw a couple other things. A could have stand for asset, but I believe from what I've researched, it really just means something really small, and we'll talk more about that. So, really cool name, just IOTA, an iota of something. I like to have IOTAs. Pretty neat. So I like the name, like the icon, and again, it's not August 11th. The founder is David Sonstabo. I hope that I'm pronouncing that right. He's the founder and leader of IOTA. I spent an hour trying to research him last night. There honestly is not a whole lot on the internet about him. He does seem to be more of an entrepreneurial mind as opposed to a cryptocurrency, guru. I imagine, we have Vitalik and Ethereum, and he's really smart as far as blockchain technology goes. We'll be noting that IOTA is very much different than blockchain technology, but this is not to say that he's not a very smart man. He is the founder and CEO of a stealth hardware IP startup. Before coming to this, he is a futurist specializing in the Internet of Things, and we'll be talking a little bit more about what does the Internet of Things mean. And again, he is more of a serial entrepreneur, it seems like. He has the potential and power to really bring a great team and a set of minds behind the IOTA project. Again, he seems more of like an entrepreneurial mind as opposed to cryptocurrency, but we're going to talk about some of the key developers that they brought on to the team. Looks like I forgot the name of the second person. His name is Keller, and I'm going to pull this up in my screen next to me because his name is Alfred Keller. But we're going to start with, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Alan El Malaya. He is one of the core developers that was brought on. He is a programmer and electrical engineer who studied at Tel Aviv University. I believe he got his bachelor's over there. He comes from a reputable company in Intel. He is an ex-employee of Intel, and he has an extensive background in computer science, specializing in Python and C++. So pretty good mind there. He's one of the core developers. Another person that they have listed is Alfred Keller, who was brought onto the team. He has an IT career that began in banking and was a partner in a medium-sized company that focused on basically access control and biometric identification. He received his master's in civil engineering at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich. And he has also a pretty extensive background in programming in C, C++, Java, and JavaScript. And these are just a couple of the core developers. They have a whole list of people that they have brought onto the team, but I wanted to highlight the backgrounds in some of the more prominent figures that they have listed. So let's move on. Now, what is IOTA? So IOTA is essentially being marketed as the backbone of the Internet of Things. And we're going to talk more about what the Internet of Things basically is in the second part of this, I guess you could call it podcast or video. But for starters, IOTA is very scalable. It's decentralized and modular. And what it does, it really is the backbone and enabler of the Internet of Things. Now, the Internet of Things is basically a lot of machines and smart devices starting to talk to each other. So we actually have a lot of cool things being built, like smart cities and smart cars, and we're going to have a lot of technology talking to each other, and IOTA is going to really help basically propagate the communication between these devices. We'll get more into technically what this all means, but it's basically based on a new distributed ledger called Tangle. Similar to blockchain, but a lot different. As you know, blockchain is also a distributed ledger, and Tangle is basically new, and we're going to get back into the details technically in just a bit. And what it is, it's basically a completely new way of reaching consensus. Consensus is how we prove that the distributed ledger is correct. We have to have a group of community members, all agreeing that we are in the same ledger here. If Sally sends a payment to John and John pays me, how does everyone else on the network know that that happened and that that was correct? And what they implement is a completely new way of basically verifying this. Also, there are no fees, and we'll find out more about why. But what it allows is for the basically infinitesimally small nano payments to be made. Right now, it doesn't make sense to send someone $1 of Bitcoin because there are fees associated with that. And in some cases, the fees can be larger than the amount sent itself. And what this is going to enable is basically microtransactions to be sent, allowing communication between devices at really fast speeds, really back and forth. And there will be no fees, so you'll enable or have the ability and permissions to send such small transactions. And we'll talk more about that. And again, this is the backbone to the Internet of Things and basically will aid in the interoperability between all devices. So we're going to get down into a little bit of the nitty-gritty here. This is the Tangle, and I want to go over sort of what it is, and we're going to break it down on the next slide a bit further. But this works very differently than blockchain. I'm going to skip forward just to the next slide. All right, I have a couple of things written down here that I want to basically make sure I don't miss because this can get really confusing. So originally, you're going to start with basically what is called this Genesis transaction. You're going to have just one block, essentially, or one transaction. And Tangle works a lot differently than blockchain. Its consensus is basically part of the transaction mechanism. Now, what this means is it's basically in blockchain technology, consensus is separate from the transactions. For example, in Ethereum and Bitcoin, we have mining. So the consensus algorithm is basically taken care of by the miners. Now, in Tangle, this is done via all the transactions that are made, and basically everyone participates in the consensus. And what we have is basically when a new transaction is created, you have to approve 2 other transactions in the Tangle. So, for example, if we start with 1 and he wants to make a transaction, he has to send, confirmation to 2 other transactions that they are in agreement, that they are correct, and verify them. And then as you go on, say, for example, D, this block here, it has to approve 2 other transactions, this one and this one. And if this guy wants to create a transaction, he has to approve 2 other transactions. So the web kind of branches and spiders out and gets very big very fast. And this works a lot differently than blockchain, where the miners have to verify whether or not transactions are correct. So again, this works a lot differently. The consensus is basically part of the transaction. In blockchain technology, consensus is sort of a separate device made separate from the transactions. So some of the benefits to having a Tangle as opposed to a blockchain are, for example, transactions, again, are part of the consensus mechanism, and there are 0 transaction fees, because in order to participate, you have to approve 2 other transactions. So you don't have to pay for your transaction. There are no transaction fees. So this is a huge benefit to blockchain technology. There are 0 transaction fees. So this will really change a lot of ways that smart devices are able to communicate with each other, because you'll have one drone and a vending machine and a smart car all being able to talk to each other, and they won't have to pay a fee. They'll be able to communicate sort of continuously. For example, say you had a shake weight on your chair that was monitoring, the weight, and it's able to continuously give feedback to the devices at basically real time, because they can happen so quickly, and you can have these very small micro nano payments essentially. Something else I also want to mention here is what we call tips. Now, these blocks represent transactions, and as you can see, transaction A and C are known as tips. And what they are is basically, a tip is basically a very new transaction on the chain, and it is it isn't approved by any other transaction. It hasn't been verified yet. As you can see, A doesn't have anything pointing to it, nor does C. B, meanwhile, does have something pointing towards it, A. So what this means is A and C are tips. And you can see as new transactions are made on the chain, then these eventually get built in deeper and deeper into the web and are no longer tips. And we're going to cover more about this in one of the graphics coming up. But just to recap a little bit more about the transactions and the Tangle web, 3 things need to happen when a transaction takes place. 1, confirmation for 2 other transactions need to happen. So when transaction X happens, it needs to approve these 2 transactions 4 and 4. And X then becomes the tip. So as you can see, transaction 4 here and transaction 4 here are being approved by X or 3, whatever you want to call it. This box basically approves these 2. So now X is the new tip. And I think on the next slide, I'm sorry, I do not have it on the next slide. Basically, again, X is the tip. So these 2 blocks right here are no longer tips anymore. In the previous slide, A and C were tips. And now basically we have this new transaction X being created, and it points to these 2 other ones. And what it has to do secondly is check for conflicts. Are these transactions in agreement? And if it's not, then it'll come back and it won't be able to process this transaction. But again, these are the first 2 pieces of information that need to take place when a transaction happens. Third, we need to calculate something called a nonce. And a nonce is actually the same thing that is calculated in Bitcoin, which takes a lot of processing power. Now, in IOTA, it is meant not exactly for the same thing. It's basically meant to confirm that this transaction isn't spam. It's a very small calculation in comparison to what you would need to do on the blockchain. And again, this is basically to confirm on the network that this isn't spam and an overload of basically communication. So moving on, this has huge potential as far as, comparing it to blockchain. So as blockchain continues to scale and go up, its usability actually decreases. Like you've noticed, we had to implement SegWit because as blockchain technology has been able to scale so massively, its usability and transaction speeds have really decreased as time goes on. And it hasn't been, the best way of basically scaling what we have in blockchain technology. Meanwhile, Tangle gets basically more and more usable and increases, and it becomes more and more accepted as it begins to scale, because we build out this web that's larger and larger, and it becomes basically more valid as time goes on. You are basically more and more accepted by the network. What this does, it actually makes transactions faster, because you are only validated by your neighbors. Because if I go back to this slide, you're only validated by your neighbors, whereas in blockchain technology, everyone has to have the same ledger. Now, Bitcoin is actually working on some things such as Lightning Network, where we can have these peer-to-peer transactions made, but one of the benefits to Tangle is that only your neighbors have to approve a transaction for it to go through. So you can have the speed of the network, increase a lot faster. And as time goes on, it only gets more and more usable, which is very different from blockchain. As I mentioned, Bitcoin and other coins have, things in place to address these issues, but IOTA is basically natively built like this. So a huge potential I see in IOTA. Now, I want to compare this, and I made this analogy here. Basically, Tangle is kind of like the neighborhood watch, where you have your neighbors looking out for you as far as transactions are concerned, where, again, the neighboring transactions here are the transactions that confirm, and as a new one is created, it confirms these two here, and so forth. So we have, what I like to call basically the neighborhood watch, whereas in blockchain technology on the right, we have sort of like the police, who are miners, and they are basically in control of the consensus. And again, I hope this analogy helps you to understand that we have the police on the right in blockchain technology, and those are really the miners, and those are the people who have to confirm transactions. While on the left, we have Tangle, which is basically kind of like the neighborhood watch, where we have people neighboring us, watching out, making sure our transactions are valid. So again, this is just part one of a two-part series on IOTA, and I'm sure I'll be continuing to cover IOTA a lot more in the weeks to come. I am bullish on IOTA. I love what it's doing from what I read so far. As I mentioned, I fell asleep reading the white paper, and what I think they have is really interesting. I don't see any other competitors for it at the moment. I really like to invest in projects that are unique and set themselves apart. And I have invested in IOTA about 3 to 4 weeks ago, and then I poured more money into it just about a week ago. And I really think it has huge potential. We're going to be covering even more on IOTA on Friday, so please tune in. Additionally, if you're not a subscriber to this YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. What that does, it allows other people in the community to know that this video was worth watching. If you're not a member of the Facebook group, join. We have a poll here. We're going to be giving money to people interested in, or whoever can guess what the what ICO I'll be covering tomorrow. So take a look at that. Additionally, I've been basically live streaming every couple of nights here on Facebook, just answering some of your guys' questions, getting feedback on what you guys are interested in and want to hear videos on. And I've been sitting here just shooting the crapper and just fielding questions from you guys. So another great reason to join the Facebook community. We have over 1,200 members and growing rapidly, so check that out. Again, if you want to join the Moon Lounge, you'll have access to me, my trades, my portfolio. You can get access to that over on Patreon. It'll bring you to a link. You can get in early. Now, get in soon, as seats are beginning to fill up. If you want to pay via cryptocurrency, let me know, and I'll send you the correct address that you need to get that started. You can email me at cryptosomniac@gmail.com. If you're new to cryptocurrency, check out my course over on Udemy. It's everything you need to know on how to get started in crypto. I'm adding to it daily. You can get it for just a price of $10 right now. We've had a lot of great feedback from the course, a lot of people suggesting things to add to it. So it's a great way for you guys to stay educated. Additionally, a lot of things are going to be changing on the channel. As you can see, we have a little bit of rebranding going on, and things are going to look a lot different. We have a website being built, logos being put out, hiring on people to the team. So a lot is going to change here, and I'm just looking for your guys' feedback on how to keep everything, intact, keep it strong, keep everyone informed. And lastly, if you want to take one-on-one appointments with me, those are beginning to fill up fast as well. You can get a link to that here in the YouTube profile banner or in the link to this description below. What you get is 30 minutes or an hour, however long you want to book with me. We can cover anything you want. If you're having trouble getting set up on some of your wallets, getting set up on exchanges, want my advice on what and what not to invest in, maybe you don't want to be part of the Moon Lounge and don't have the time to sit here and make trades, might be good if you're a long-term investor to sit and talk with me and pick my brain. So I think that's going to wrap it up here for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to come back tomorrow for coverage on a brand new ICO, as well as part 2 to the series on Friday. Hit that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already. We make these videos here daily. So everyone, stay a crypto somniac, because the rich never sleep.